Hi, I'm Valentine and I'm feeling vengeful. Anyway, so my whole thing in this wretched life is I consider myself a poet, and that is sort of the cornerstone upon which I rest my will to live and my understanding of my personhood. And I thought that this year, the year of 2025, has been a bad year for me, writing wise. For the entirety of the year, I was beating myself up. I was like, I'm in a creative identity crisis. I'm writing nothing. And when I am writing, I'm writing nothing good. And I don't know what I'm doing. I'm so directionless. I lost my passion. Like everything under the sun that you can think of in that vein, I was thinking and telling myself. And now that it's January 2026, I'm looking back and I'm like, damn, if I just list everything that I have written, a very different picture emerges. I think my issue was I was comparing 2025 unfairly to 2024 because 2024 was an incredible year for me as a poet. I made so many breakthroughs. That was truly the year I found my voice. And it was also a year where I was blessed enough to have two other wonderful poets to workshop my poetry with on the regular. And I don't have that privilege anymore. 2025 was very, very, very different. And when I say I was directionless, I kind of was, but it wasn't as bad of a thing as I thought while I was experiencing it. I had an understanding, even while I was beating myself up, that if I persisted stubbornly at trying to write the exact same way I was writing in 2024, despite everything that changed in my personal life, I would become very, very stagnant very fast, and I would just produce pale copies of what I've already done, but passionless and bloodless and fleshless. Why would I? Something I do need to address still in 2026 and sort of fix is my poetry truly is at its best, I think, when I'm in love. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I can't rely on a different person for my creative process entirely, always, because it backfires. But hey, whenever I get to use it, I will use it. My habitat is writing love poetry or love stories, and fair enough that it's easier when I am romantically involved with someone, but I need to learn to write about love while not being in love myself. That being said, let's talk about all of the love poems I've written this year. I met someone really special, right? And pretty much the day I met them, I experienced this irrepressible urge to write poetry about them, but it was very, very different from the last time I experienced something similar in terms of inspiration. In the glorious year of 2024, my writing for the person I was falling for was pretty much, I can only explain it in metaphors, right? It was very elaborate and was very intentional, and a lot of it was sort of like building a cathedral or working on jewelry for them. That would be an even better way to put it, I think. And God knows I've produced some beautiful rings and necklaces and crowns. But this time it was much more, I wanted it to be more delicate and soft. And for that to work, I think I needed to put my chisel away and just be very, very sincere and honest in a way that would have scared me a couple years ago. And while most of my poetry has a complex architectural skeleton to the point where I outline my poems before writing them, this time the writing process was wildly different. It was literally just opening the floodgates. I needed to do nothing else. I needed to do no preparation. It was just this very, very genuine, spontaneous, breathless outburst every time. And the poems are very, very short, but I'm very fond of them, not just because of the experience of writing them, but I'm genuinely excited by how different they are, and yet at the same time how they work, how they're still very recognizably me. And it helped quite a bit with breaking out of repetitive imagery or vocabulary that I've gotten used to using as a crutch. Because my feelings were very different and the person is very different, I was forced to look inward for an entirely different symbolic language. Some things stay the same. I still talk about like innards and viscera all the time. I incorrigible in that sense. I forgot to say something I find important, and that is that this was the first time I ever wrote poetry for the eyes of one person alone, without even considering for a second it being like read by a wider audience, or just like being a piece that stands on its own in some sort of vacuum, available for consumption to just everybody and anybody. Usually I'm very eager, no matter how personal the piece is, to expose it to the wider world. And this was like the opposite situation. It was the first time the poems were too intimate for them to see the light of day. I have a certain poetic voice, a certain persona that comes across in the things I write, and it's highly manufactured, it's highly artificial, and I'm not saying that disparagingly. I worked really hard to achieve this very specific effect. But I am insanely grateful for the feeling that this endeavor afforded me, which was this feeling of safety. I was safe to just play around and try things out and show a very private, defenseless side of me. It changed the dynamic between me and my writing, and it made my writing feel more like home. And also writing poetry for their eyes alone was super cute. It was great while it lasted. I'm now shifting gears a little bit and trying to go even further in terms of things that would have scared me, and being even more transparent and honest. And I'm working on writing poetry that is purely, utterly lustful, instead of having this respectable, tender veneer of romance. Not that I'm oh my god, I put it incorrectly. I think I made the wrong impression when I said it. I love my romantic poetry. I just think I need to explore further who I am as a poet once I take that away, because the tendency I have in my poetry is being very opaque and covering things up in as much ostentatious imagery as I possibly can, instead of just saying what I mean. And sometimes what I mean is just desire. And it's spooky. It's spooky revealing that. It's spooky to be that vulnerable. But that's how I know I should do it. And I've done something very fun that I'm very proud of with one of the poems. And it's going to be very hard to explain. I'll give you some examples, but hear out the pitch first. I looked at one of the poems and I asked myself, wouldn't it be an incredibly hard and thus incredibly exciting challenge, just aesthetic craft challenge, to write an inverse poem out of this one? I sort of thought about it in terms of negative and positive film. It would have been much easier to just replace every word with its antonym, but that's not what I was trying to do. I wanted to replace every word, or every couple words, every image, with something that felt like its opposite, aesthetically and emotionally. It took some trying, and I don't think I could do it with any other poem. This one just landed itself the best to this exercise, but I am enamored with the result. It was like magic. It was like uncovering a poem underneath a poem. Whoa. And it was so fun, because I couldn't predict how the poem would turn out, and it was entirely out of my hands pretty much. And it was great. I'm very happy that I came up with the idea and then had the balls to execute it. So for example, this voicing of sunlight becomes this muslin of blizzards, or this red watercolor ocean becomes this opaline silken sky, or the last one, okay, I promise. This woundless scarring of the collarbone only beneath the skin becomes this lacerated shoulder blades, grapefruit split bone flesh. I mean, need I say more? I also wrote 2 fanfic poems. I wrote 2 poems from the POVs of 2 characters from Alien Stage, which is a show I'm obsessed with. It's available on YouTube. It's very short. You can binge it in an hour. I'll link it in the description. I cannot get started pitching it to you because if I start, I will not stop. But I wrote 2 poems from the POVs of 2 fictional characters, and it was so liberating. It gave me this understanding that I didn't always have to just mine my own experience or immediate feelings for me to write a poem I'm proud of. And again, it unlocked this treasury of imagery and vocabulary that I'm never ever using, just because I am sort of stuck in my own psyche, and my psyche can get quite repetitive as one's psyche does. I'm sort of stuck being me. And these poems stand completely on their own, like you don't have to know the lore to read them, which I am content with. I would be pissed if it wasn't the case. I wouldn't be satisfied with myself. So it feels like a little fun secret that nobody can know if I don't tell them that it's actually not about me. It's about these 2 kids in space being tortured by aliens. Actually, another thing that I want to work on in 2026 is I want more eyes on my work. And I'm giving up trying to get traditionally published through like magazines and stuff. I can't be bothered right now. I don't know, maybe one day. So I'm working on like figuring out alternative ways of doing that. And one of the ways I already came up with is I put those 2 fanfic poems on Archive of Our Own, and I will graciously link my AO3 profile in the description for now. If you're not seeing it in the description, tough luck. I must have changed my mind. The camera died, my voice died, the sun went down, but I have more to say. Another thing I wrote that is like deceptively small but meant a lot to me was a sequel, or rather an epilogue to my magnum opus, Blood Mold. Blood Mold is this very, very, very long poem I wrote in 2024, believe it or not. It's this very long poem, 3 12-line stanzas, 1 24-line stanza, and then 3 more 12-line stanzas. It's about this married couple and this creepy creature that invites itself into their house. It's called Carnage and is referred to only by its, but it's very much a character and then a living, breathing creature as opposed to a concept. And it's basically like a character study of this couple, and it deals a lot with enabling in relationships, because it is basically about an eating disorder, but it's about more than that. It's about trauma, and it's about how these 2 people decide to help each other deal with it in the most unhelpful, unhealthy ways possible. Ultimately, it is about the slow rotting away of their relationship that happens in the background, while in the foreground they both grapple with their very different relationship with this new presence in their life, because Carnage has a very, very different outlook on things and a very different way of doing things, and the way they both react to it and accept it or struggle to accept it exposes a lot about their own demons. And I wanted to write a sequel to that poem so badly, but what I ended up writing is this short 2-part epilogue from the POV of one of the partners and the other one of the partners. And what I discovered writing that epilogue was pretty fascinating and meaningful to me. For example, I did not realize while I was writing Blood Mold that this is about a sapphic couple. In my mind back then, it was about a husband and a wife, but while I was writing the epilogue, I realized that both of these characters are actually women. And the epilogue is titled Lymph Rain. I'm very proud of this title. I used to not title my poems at all, but once I, for lack of a better way to put it, once I got good, it became extremely fun for me. It's like half the pleasure of writing a poem, honestly, because it's the entire framing of it, right? But anyway, it's titled Lymph Rain, and I'm very proud of this title because it evokes everything I wanted it to evoke. It parallels Blood Mold very nicely, but it stands on its own as well. The rain part of it evokes melancholy and nostalgia and is quite gentle. But then we have Lymph, which is visceral, but also quite disgusting and nasty. And I wanted it to be disgusting and nasty because this nostalgia is a nostalgia for something ugly and something that ultimately they both want to go back to, but cannot ever go back to. In fact, part of the poem goes, let me remember that. I swear I know it by heart. What am I missing? Inuring our viscera to only digest in each other's, or the rosy rest, or how friable honesty gets. Pretty good, huh? Sorry, I'm so smug about it. I meant to say, what do I miss? Not what am I missing, what do I miss? Should not have tried to recite it from memory. Might be. I like the open-ended closure of it. I like the oxymoron of its tenderness and its bitterness. Because even in this ultimately love poem, which Blood Mold isn't, even in this love poem that could be rather sweet on the surface, even there, the way they both think of each other and remember each other is almost terrifying. It's rather sinister. One of the lines about a character's eyes goes, stuck anaconda unhinged right before the sobs. And in a different part, there is an invitation that goes, come home, Dolly, make me run. It was great writing it. I'm very happy I wrote it. And it feels like the chapter of Blood Mold is closed poetry-wise. But so I wanted to write a very elaborate sequel to Blood Mold, but I realized when I was being really honest with myself that I actually just wanted to write more about these characters, but not in the same universe, sort of. Not in the same way, not in the same... The choreography I wanted to be very different. I wanted to create like an alternative universe, if you will, with these two, because I'm obsessed with them, frankly. They're both just me, but two very different facets of me. I honestly don't know how to write characters who are not me. Character flaw. Get it? Character. So the final thing I did that year was outline a short story about these two. Well, it started out as a short story and now it's a hybrid monstrosity. It has... Part of it is going to be written as a play, part of it is going to be written as a regular short story in prose, and part of it is going to be written as a prose poem. I'm very, very, very excited. It's called Pigeon Milk. And I considered putting it on YouTube as like an audiobook sort of thing. But I don't know. Oh, and I also wrote like 5,000 words of a fanfic that I need to finish. I guess there was that. No biggie. And without an awkward outro, bye bye!